Okay, Dr. Wecht's speech today involves concerning the deaths of Jack Ruby, David Ferrie, and Dorothy Kilgallen. And these are all mysterious situations that need to be addressed. So without further ado, Dr. Wecht.
Thank you very much, Professor Denton. I appreciate your extremely gracious introduction. I want to thank you for your comments and for the presentation of the award. First and foremost, I want to express my deep appreciation and gratitude to Judith V. Baker. Judith, Judith has done a truly magnificent job over the years. Just look around you, and those of you who have attended all of her conferences, and others of you who are here for the first time, she has worked tirelessly and effectively in putting together these marvelous conferences. So I thank Judy and for her graciousness in inviting me once again to participate in her program. The next comment I want to make is to have all of you join me in extending the heartiest birthday congratulations, and more importantly, congratulations on the marriage of my dear friend and longtime colleague and one of the true JFK anti-Warren Commission stalwarts, Robert Groden, and his new I knew that Bob, as he began to approach his 45th birthday, would decide finally to make that move. I want to thank all of you for coming, many of you from some distance, and including particularly then people who have traveled from abroad. And then we have our special guest, Japanese television, who are here. I can't wait to tell my longtime friend and colleague, who is very actively involved among so many other of his professional pursuits in television programs in China, Dr. Henry Lee, about the fact that I'm on Japanese television. I'll rub Henry's nose in that. And by the way, it's fascinating, Dr. Lee, who's been involved in this too for many years, officially. Henry, his birthday is today. We always remember that on November 22nd. By the way, before I forget, in mentioning Henry's name and referencing his input on JFK, for those of you who don't know, and it's not a secret, but I don't know if there's been any big public announcement yet either, but in March, I'm pretty sure the dates are set in March. You have plenty of time to check into it. Oliver Stone has put together, he may still be putting it together. I've been interviewed extensively, Dr. Lee, Bob Tannenbaum, many others, a series of programs, a sequel to his previous input, of course, on his wonderful movie. So look for that documentary in March of next year. So now that we've made, and I want to thank my son Ben, by the way, who was here for all of his work in putting together, working with me on the presentation of the PowerPoint. And Ben has put on some marvelous programs at Duquesne University in Pittsburgh. We did the 2003 40th anniversary and 2013. And I think one or both of them, I know 2013, are available too in videotapes if anybody wants to hearken back.
And downloads.
As I reflect upon my involvement, and I thank so many of you who have expressed gracious personal comments to me this morning, I think, and as one grows older, these kinds of reflections seem to occur more frequently, along with increasing back pain and increasing frequency or urgency, especially nocturia. All the men can appreciate that, right? But there are some more pleasant things too, and interesting things. And the whole business of being involved in these cases, in fact, I was just checking my emails as I sat here waiting to come up, and an email that came in today is on another unrelated conspiracy. Unrelated in terms of these assassinations of JFK and RFK and MLK, but related in terms of who is responsible for these things. Who is the sinister force? And this was an email from Robert O'Dowd, with whom I've been working a lot on the Gander Air Force Base. Gander air crash, you know about that? The plane that crashed with a whole bunch of military people, and they said that the plane just exploded, some kind of ammunition or whatever went awry. It's a long story, I'm not going to digress into that. But you got people on the plane with carbon monoxide levels of 50, 55, 60%. You don't get that in an explosion. You need a fire. You need time for the smoke to develop, for CO to form. Another example of the government. Wouldn't we all like to lay this on, going back to Stalin and Khrushchev, and now to Putin, and maybe reaching over into Mao Zedong and Zhou Enlai? Wouldn't we love to lay it on them? But God damn it, we can't. I always think of that magnificent comic strip character, the delightful Possum Pogo, and that caption on that one day, and I have it in, not today, but in one of my overall JFK presentations, that cartoon, we have met the enemy and he is us. That is the painful thing about this, and that is something that we must never forget. Well, listen, now having made all these introductory comments of a necessary matter as a component of the social etiquette and professional ethics, I want to get into the real subject, and I apologize if anybody feels they have been sucked in under false pretenses, but let's get right into it and talk about Jeffrey Epstein, right? Conspiracies never end. There I was at, we have a lovely home in Connecticut, in Milford, just about 70, 75 miles out of New York. It goes way back to when I was a child and started to go there. And anyway, and so I was up there for, I thought would be a relaxing week with my wife. Don't get a chance to spend too much time. But then the calls start coming in. Jeffrey Epstein found dead on Sunday, August 10th. And then on Thursday, the 14th, the chief medical examiner of New York City, Barbara Sampson, who did not attend the autopsy, who never saw the body of Jeffrey Epstein, who went against the pathologist on her staff who did the autopsy, and who signed a manner of death out as pending. Barbara Sampson announced on Thursday, before obviously any kinds of investigative reports could possibly have been given to her, that the official ruling was suicide. In the meantime, I got a call from my friend, and despite our strong disagreements on JFK, we've remained close friends and professional colleagues, Dr. Michael Bodden, who attended the autopsy as representative of Jeffrey Epstein's brother. And Michael called, clued me in, and then I got called and spent a good part of Thursday, and then all of Friday with TV. They sent the cameraman up from Fox TV. He arrived at our place about 11:30 in the morning and did not leave until 11 o'clock at night. One program after another, and then on Saturday they picked me up drove my wife and me into New York, and I was on the program with Judge Pirro that Saturday night. And so I've been on many, many programs now with Jeffrey Epstein, some still coming up. Last Wednesday, I did live Skype for close to an hour with a program in London, England, on Epstein, so you can follow that case. So these kinds of cases never end. But of course, the ones we're dealing with are not only the ones that we are most interested in, obviously, that is why we are here, but they are the most important cases because of whom they relate to. I am often asked, it's a very common question, invariably with audiences, somebody will ask, or in some kind of an interview, what is your most interesting case? What case have you been most concerned with? And the answer immediately, unhesitatingly, is JFK. But not just because he was a president, although that should be sufficient reason, isn't it? But because, truly, and I want you to understand and appreciate this from a forensic scientific standpoint, this is the most controversial, the most multifaceted, and the most complicated case, largely because of the way in which things were handled. You know, I've had all these cases over the years, from JFK up to Epstein, everything in between, RFK and MLK, and Ron Brown and Vincent Foster, and Sonny Von Bulow and Tammy Wynette and Elvis Presley, Waco Branch Davidian, Chandra Levy, and O.J. Simpson, John Benet Ramsey, Michael Jackson, and I'm sure I have left out some. And there are cases about which I have doubts and questions. Captain Jeffrey McDonald, I still have questions about that case, a continuing correspondence over all the years. Gene Harris, these cases never end. But with JFK and all the things related to him, the problems arise. Of course, we have the conspiracy to assassinate President Kennedy, and how anybody of modest intelligence, but certainly people then of intellectual high level, can question that this is a matter that always puzzles me, and it is an obstacle for all of us to keep in mind, that you're not dealing with, taking the word that Hillary Clinton used, which she never should have used, obviously. It was a political misplay of the highest order. But if you wanted to just talk privately and refer to some people that you find unacceptable intellectually or in other ways, to refer to them as, deplorables. But we cannot dismiss these people as deplorables. Many of them are doctors and lawyers and engineers and professors and academicians and high-level political people. These are not fools and ignoramuses. And that is and will continue to be a major problem, as well as, of course, the news media. And I believe that in this country, given the state of technology and the romance that people have with television and everything, that the problem that we have that is number one, perhaps even arguably ahead of what we must deal with in terms of the political governmental forces in an official legal way, is the news media. How do you make a move in America on anything if you can't make a breakthrough with the New York Times over here on the left and the Wall Street Journal over here on the right? And I get both newspapers. I look at the headlines of the two papers in the morning, favorite time of the day, my wife and I, for our coffee and bagel, and God damn it, I'm in two different worlds. Two different worlds. I'm not a TV guy, but then you got Fox, put up the right hand on that, and CNN, MSNBC on the left. What world are you in? What world are you in? And we have all of these from both sides as our enemies, as our obstacles. I want you to know this, particularly the people who are somewhat younger. The New York Times, Newsweek, Life, ABC, CBS, NBC, all of them bought into this immediately. Immediately. And of course, with the assassination of Oswald and the official pronouncement on Monday morning, already quasi-official over the weekend, and then absolutely with great relief, I'm certain, on Monday morning on the 25th, Hoover telling the world the case is over. And if J. Edgar Hoover said something, God damn it, that was it. That was it. Anybody going to question J. Edgar Hoover? He said that was it. And that was it. And the New York Times, they rushed to produce their own book. They rushed to produce their own series and presentations, and everybody else joined in. So you today believe that they're going to come up and pound their chest and bow and beg forgiveness? You missed the biggest goddamn story of the 20th century, arguably, perhaps in the history of America. Certainly in anybody's ratings, certainly among the top 5, 6 events in the history of this great nation. You missed it. You blew it. How do you deal with that? How do you? You're the editor of the New York Times. You're the editor of the Wall Street Journal. Tell me, is it an editorial? Is it a series of articles? Some op-ed pieces? How do you deal with it? You just do it one day and it's all over? Please, we're sorry we missed it. Don't hold your breath for that. That is a problem. Another major problem, of course, is the young people. And of course, they're not here today. And nothing delights me more than having the opportunity to speak to students. And I readily accept these high school, college students anytime that I can fit it into my schedule, because I want to reach out to them. Go and get your children's and your grandchildren's books in high school and college and see then the reference to JFK and RFK and MLK. It happened such and such a day, such and such event, and then that was it. And to the extent that they covered it all, and Lee Harvey Oswald was a sole assassin, and James Earl Ray was a sole assassin, and Sirhan was the only one that did any shooting against Bobby Kennedy. And that's it. Well, what do you expect these kids to do? You expect them to give up their cheerleading and their ball gaming and their dates and their studies and start delving into these cases to learn about them? How many kids are going to do that? Where are they going to get their information from? That is one of our obstacles. And I take these minutes to just point this out, because an audience like this, you folks and people like all of us, are the key to this. There's no question, and I don't mean to dramatize it or to place any special mantle upon our heads, but we are the torchbearers. We are the continuum. And you have to keep this going if we are ever to see a breakthrough. It is not going to happen spontaneously. I have not seen am not aware of, maybe somebody has seen, you could mention it later on, something of a national poll. I remember the peak sitting there in New York City at one of the national TV programs. They had just finished a poll, a very legitimate poll, and 85% of people rejected the Warren Commission report. But then I remember a poll, and I don't know, again, a national poll, and it was down to 65 or 62%. I don't know what it would be today. We're losing it. We're losing the battle. So I just make these remarks of a prefatory nature to remind all of us what our mission is in life, in addition to what we're doing to make a living and deal with our families and our work and so on, to know that you seize every opportunity to proselytize, to convert. Think of yourselves being sent out from the Church of Mormon. I love that delightful play, Book of Mormon, when they get their assignments and told where to go and see what they can do to convert people from Asia to Africa to Europe and so on. Think of yourselves in that capacity. As I reflect upon the opportunities I've had then and the enjoyable intellectual moments that I've had, and I think of sharing the stage over the years, on the one hand, with Oliver Stone, and another time with Roger Stone, with Senator Arlen Specter and Mark Lane, with Vincent Bugliosi and David Mattick and Ting Thompson on our side, with Gerald Posner and Sylvia Maher and others on the other side. It's been a delightful opportunity, and you proceed in a forceful manner, but you seize the opportunity to discuss like mature individuals. And I was highly honored when I got a call from Vincent Bugliosi's family asking me to deliver a eulogy when he died. I was highly honored when Senator Arlen Specter, running as a Republican, and me as a former Democratic chairman and member of the Democratic National Committee and involved in other aspects of Democratic politics in 2004, asked me to endorse him for his re-election as U.S. Senator in 2004, which I did. First time I ever did that. And I endorsed him again in 2010 when he converted to being a Democrat and he lost so in the primary, because he was a damn good senator for Pennsylvania. You know, we never got into fisticuffs over the single bullet theory, of which he was, you know, the father, the biological father. That was proven by DNA.
Do you think he really believed it?
That's a good question. The gentleman here asking, do I think he really believed it? No. I think at the time, I think he was too smart to believe it. You know, I'm always, every time I use that phrase, I remember, what is her name? Oh my God, the German Jewish right-wing writer, the female. Anne Rain. Anne Rain. She was very close to William Buckley, who was extremely religious. And they were having this discussion and debate, and Buckley would always reach out to God in addition, you know, to back up his political conservatism. And Ayn Rand said to him, she said, Bill, you are too smart to believe in God. And I think of people like that who are too smart to believe in the Warren Commission.
Well,
I was told this.
How was he honorable?
Yeah. Well, I was the honor. Well, okay, please. Well, okay. how is he honorable? That's another question of the word honorable, just as an appellation that goes with people who are elected to office. But I was told just one person removed by one of our strong people in Philadelphia who had lunch with Specter not long before he died, and Specter expressed his great doubts about the single bullet theory. So let's move on with these, and I want to then preface this one more comment as we proceed. We have different theories and different beliefs, and I'm sure that many of you will disagree with some thoughts that I might express, although I'm going to keep an open mind, and we'll have time for questions until one of two things happens. Either Judith will bring the meeting to a close, or I'll have to run to the bathroom because of my prostate, whichever comes first. But what I want to say is that, there's not going to be any grand prize awarded at the end by any entity to the person or group that comes closest to the true facts of the assassination. The true facts. How many shooters? Exactly where were they? Exactly who was behind it? Name them. Which part of government? Which were the individuals? Which were the entities? What kind of weapon was used? What kinds of weapons? What are the bullets and so on? Who all played a role? Was Johnson involved? Was Hoover involved? So we're going to have these disagreements. But, this is not a game in which somebody will get a gold prize and a silver and a bronze. My point is that our ultimate objective is one of commonality, to show that this was not an assassination of the president by a sole assassin by the name of Lee Harvey Oswald. Once we open up that door, then wherever it leads, it'll lead. That's the door we must pound on. That's the wall which we must surmount and climb over to get this case reopened. And wherever it leads, so be it. That is what is important. So do not become too intensely upset. You disagree with a colleague, and there are disagreements among some of my closest colleagues, even on the medical side, Mantic and Aguilar, and Thompson and Chesser and DeSales and others, even just dealing with the medical aspects. And remember, from a forensic scientific standpoint, we've got pathology, neurology, neurosurgery, radiology, medicine, and then other fields of science, acoustics, and then medical legal investigation, criminalistics. We have all of these. And these, by the way, that I just mentioned, these all have national board certifications. These are not just areas in which people become interested as a matter of vocational or avocational pursuit. These are all entities formally recognized now. You take courses, you spend years in studying, you have examinations, and two are medical, pathology and psychiatry. American Board of Pathology has a separate examination for forensic pathology. American Board of Psychiatry has a separate one for the American Board of Psychiatry in forensic psychiatry. And the others are PhD type programs. And you've got epidemiology, and you've got entomology and anthropology and nursing, etc. And people who become top level in their other fields. And of course, I forgot to mention also on the medical side, radiology, and obviously then neurosurgery. I had a delightful experience, a high honor. 2 weeks ago Wednesday, of speaking for over an hour at Grand Rounds, the University of Pittsburgh School of Medicine, Department of Neurosurgery. And the chairman of the Department of Neurology came and spent the entire time there too with his colleagues. So here you have these top neurosurgeons, professors and residents and so on, and they were fascinated. And that presentation was a PowerPoint in which I took my 1973 Legal Medicine Annual. I had a series that went on for about 20 years, Legal Medicine Annual, in which I would invite people to contribute chapters on various subjects in the overall field of legal medicine and forensic science. In 1973, in the Legal Medicine Annual, one of the chapters was a study in contrast. And that's all I did, in addition to some introductory remarks, was to present the complete autopsy on RFK and the complete autopsy on JFK. You talk about differences. You want to compare a McDonald's hamburger to the top steak at one of the national steak houses? That's the goddamn difference. That's the difference. And if you haven't had an opportunity to study that, look and see what my colleague, Dr. Tom Noguchi, who did that autopsy, called me up 3, 4 in the morning. I was leaving that morning with my son Ben, who's here, my other 2 sons, for 2 conferences in Washington, D.C., and Puerto Rico. My wife was still in the hospital, having given birth to our 4th child, my only daughter. And I said, oh my God, Tom, once again has forgotten the 3-hour time difference. 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, calling to tell me Senator Kennedy has been shot and is not expected to survive. Tom didn't need any help or input from me on forensic pathology, a top-level forensic pathologist from the very beginning. But we had become close friends at the American Academy of Forensic Sciences in the early 60s as young men. And Tom wanted to reach out to me, knowing of my outspokenness on JFK about the way they had spirited the body of the president out of Dallas, etc. And I gave Tom some advice, which he followed. Reach out first to want somebody close to the Kennedy family. And I suggested Pierre Salinger, who was a resident native of California. And then I said, Tom, preempt them. You invite them, the military, to send in their people as your observers, there. And we knew these people. They were our contemporaries. They were board-certified forensic pathologists in the U.S. military. And Tom did that and reached out and invited them. And then he had professors from USC and on and on. Look it up sometime. Look up that autopsy. And I'm one of the official consultants on that case too. Look at the autopsy. Look at the detailed study of the brain, so on. And then look at John F. Kennedy and see the autopsy done by 2 pathologists, career military people at Bethesda Naval Center who had never done a single gunshot wound autopsy in their entire careers. I pound that home when I speak to any group, and I say, well, I can't say it to this audience, but in other audiences, I said amongst you, not here obviously today, but amongst you, there are people who still believe in the Warren Commission because it came from the government. Government doesn't lie to us, right? The government says something, that's it, okay? And I say to them, I want you to know what your evidentiary burden is. I want you to know that you're going into court with 2 guys who had never done a gunshot wound autopsy in their entire careers. And then I want you to know that the brain was never examined. Look again in the official autopsy report. Serial sections of the brain, parallel, are not made 2 weeks later after the brain was fixed in formalin to change the consistency, which is what is done, so you can study it, cutting now a hard-boiled egg instead of dealing with a soft-boiled egg in the fresh state. Serial sections of the brain are not made in order to preserve the specimen. Preserve the specimen? For whom? Jackie Kennedy's mantelpiece? The president's grandchildren? Whom are you preserving this for? So know this, and these are the points to hammer. And that wasn't until 1972. Look it up, August 27, page 1, New York Times, Fred Graham had the exclusive because he had helped me finally get in, and I'm not going to digress into that, to the National Archives, the first non-government related, non-government supported forensic pathologist given access to the autopsy materials to the National Archives. President's brain missing, page 1. Oh, there are other people who knew that, of course, but nobody had ever said a damn word about it, including the Ramsey Clark panel in 1968, top-level people. The chief where I trained, Russell Fisher, chief medical examiner of Maryland. Richard Lindenberg, top neuropathologist, formerly from Germany, the Luftwaffe, but a nice guy, forgetting that, but a damn good forensic neuropathologist. They were there in the Ramsey Clark panel with others. They never said a goddamn word about the president's brain missing. So I made this great discovery, like Columbus discovered America. Benji's mother, my lovely wife from Norway, she was born in Norway and lived there for 6 years under Nazi rule and delivered messages from her father, who was in the underground with his underground radio, to people there in Norway, telling them what was going on in the world. And there's my wife, 4 or 5 years old, running around with her little school book, into which these notes were stuffed for his neighbors and collaborators, just like the Vikings discovered America 300-400 years ago. So I say to my wife, Sigrid, God damn it, we're going to be rich today if your forebears had had enough sense to plant their goddamn flags there and take over. So Columbus discovered America in 1492, like Wecht discovered the missing brain. All right, so let's proceed. Lee Harvey Oswald. And again, I thank my son Ben for helping me put together this PowerPoint. So I just want to give you the hard facts, and all of which you, of course, everyone here knows in detail. So I just broke it down, arbitrarily. We have the identity and the association and the date and place of death. You'll be seeing this now with each case. And the circumstances, and then the official cause and manner of death. A gunshot wound of the chest, which got the heart, the aorta, internal organs, and the abdomen. Okay, so that's the background. We all know that. And what are the theories? Well, here's first the autopsy findings. Now, I have to deal with facts. I have to deal with what is there as a forensic pathologist. I can interpret, I can express different opinions. I do that all the time. I'm very proud of the fact that 2 days ago, somebody right here, I think in Dallas, I know in Texas, I believe Dallas, was going to be executed. Rodney Reed, an African-American man, convicted of murder, to be executed on the 20th. I and 3 other forensic pathologists wrote separate independent reports, and other people got involved, and the execution was stayed. We showed that he could not have committed the murder because of the timeline, and other cases like that, of which I am very proud. So there are many cases. There's nothing absolute about pathology, although we are the most tangible, concrete, and scientifically definitive of all fields of medicine. Still, there are differences of opinion. I've expressed them. Zahal case in California, just thinking of the past year, the young Eurasian woman found hanging completely nude out the balcony of her multimillionaire boyfriend Spreckles mansion in San Diego. Swartz, right over here, a federal border guard charged with killing a teenage Mexican boy, charged with first-degree murder. I testified and got him acquitted. A guy named Miller in Iowa, charged with killing his mother, first-degree murder, got him acquitted. I mean, so there are differences of opinion. I'm not saying this to boast. I'm saying that there are differences of opinion. The people on the other side were not fools. Top-level forensic pathologists, chief medical examiners, San Diego, Miami, Dade County, chief. But there are differences of opinion. But look, these are findings. Gunshot wound, left chest, spleen, stomach, aorta, massive hemorrhages. And then you have the things that follow But look at those, when you have a laceration, a perforation of the aorta, you know, I think if you had a cardiovascular surgeon right there, you're going to die. And the blood in both chest cavities and in the abdominal cavity. All right, so there it is. And who did this autopsy, by the way? This is interesting. To reflect upon this, you probably don't know this. The guy who did this autopsy is the guy who should have done the autopsy on JFK. Dr. Earl Rose. I knew him in the Air Force. Unlike President Trump, I had the good fortune of having feet that had perfectly normal arches, so I couldn't get the hell out of it, and I spent 2 years in the Air Force. It really wasn't a bad 2 years. I enjoyed it, especially meeting my wife-to-be. I went to a conference. My chief was a wonderful guy, knowing of my plans to go into forensic pathology, told me about these forensic pathology conferences at the Armed Forces Institute of Pathology, which was the mecca of pathology for many, many years in DC, right on the grounds of Walter Reed, where, by the way, there were forensic pathologists, none of whom was called in to do the autopsy when the body was brought up to Washington, D.C. So Earl Rose went there. You know this. He went to the Parkland Hospital, right here in this magnificent city. He was pushed up against a wall, threatened physically, profanity, hands on guns. He followed them out into the driveway protesting, obviously to no avail. That's who did this autopsy, Dr. Earl Rose, board-certified forensic pathologist. Okay. What are the theories? Well, some people think there was a fatal injection of air. You know, you would not have needed to put air into Lee Harvey Oswald to assure his death any more than you would have to bring up 5 more microphones to ensure that I'm being heard. I mean, you know, it's, you know, I mean, man, you know, this is a tragedy, but, you know, you are going to die. This kind of an injury, you're not going to survive this. And I believe that Earl Rose, if there had been an air embolism, would have found it. I'm just giving you my thoughts, and we're going to be time. People disagree, and you'll express your thoughts, but I'm just giving you my thoughts. All right? Jack Ruby. Starting off as Jacob Rubenstein, already mafioso, I think, at the age of 17. Died then at Parkland Memorial Hospital, waiting second trial. Official cause, pulmonary emboli. Those are blood clots that form in the legs, mostly of a man, and a woman in the legs or in the pelvic region. And they travel through the venous system and go into the right side of the heart, and then coming out the second chamber, the right ventricle, through the pulmonary artery on the way to the lungs to give up carbon dioxide and pick up oxygen. They get stuck, and that's called an embolism. A thrombus is where it forms. An embolism is a thrombus that travels. Then it becomes an embolism, and due to carcinoma of the lungs. Here are the autopsy findings. Adenocarcinoma of the lungs, bronchiolar. The bronchioles are the branches of the bronchi which come from the trachea. Adenocarcinoma metastatic, lymph nodes, the plural, the lining of the lungs, the liver, the brain, ribs and vertebra. Emboli in the pulmonary arteries from the right leg, thrombosis, which is where they usually form. And other findings. Those are the autopsy findings. What are the theories? That he was overexposed to diagnostic x-rays. He was injected with cancer cells. The cells in his lungs were of pancreatic origin. There was there was cancer metastatic found in the pancreas. So somebody raised the question of somebody took pancreatic cells. Now, it is possible to inject somebody with cancer cells. You all know that. I think you were told that in discussion that you've had in this program about Dr. Mary Ellen Sherman, Mary's monkey. You can inject. Can I disprove that Ruby was injected with cancer cells? No, I can't disprove it. Is it possible? Yes. Is it possible that with excessive radiation you can produce cancer? Yes, you can. These are scientific facts. People develop cancer from overexposure, different kinds, and you can inject. So this is a case. People can argue that this is what was done to Jack Ruby, and I have no scientific basis to dismiss or to refute that contention. I can only tell you that cancer of the lungs is not rare. It's either number one or number two, certainly among the top three cancers in men, and metastases spread through the lymph channels and the vascular channels is something then that occurs. Is it possible? Yes, it is possible. What is, of course, significant is Jack Ruby, and anybody who doubts for one moment that Jack Ruby was sent there and was ordered, or shall we put it politely, invited by mafioso chieftains, and where their orders came from, who knows? And that gets into some fascinating discussions I've had with a gentleman, John Curington, now 93, 94, still working on his ranch here in Texas, who for 40 years was H.L. Hunt's right-hand man. H.L. Hunt, for those of you who do not recall, was arguably the richest man in the world at that time. Extremely right-wing, daily phone conversations with J. Edgar Hoover. Curington has some interesting things to talk about there in terms of the relationships between Hunt and Hoover, and conversations and discussions and events that followed the assassination of JFK, and subsequent involvement, including the delivery of a huge sum of money by him, Curington, from Mr. Hunt to James Earl Ray's attorney, the foremost criminal defense attorney in America, Percy Foreman, who was all set to go to trial in which would have been one of his biggest trials, and he was top of the line with F. Lee Bailey and Jerry Spence and so on, all of whom I've had the pleasure of working with, by the way, fantastic guys and so on. And Curington describes, he walks in and he says, Mr. Foreman, meeting had been set up, of course. Mr. Foreman, I have a message for you from Mr. Hunt, and I have here in my attaché case 140 reasons why James Earl Ray should plead guilty and not go to trial. And they opened up the attaché case, and there were $140,000 bills. And James Earl Ray pled out. By the way, I participated in that autopsy with the medical examiner of Tennessee at the request of James Earl Ray's brother's attorney. So this is an arguable case, but I just want to say, you know, it's, for me, it would be conjecture, but within the realm of possibility. Dorothy Kilgallen, fascinating case. She was one of the foremost journalist reporters in the country, no question about her. She was tough as nails, and she covered, remember the Sam Shepard case, and every other big case, she was there. She had this wonderful family townhouse in Manhattan. She was a very interesting woman. She was having an affair with Johnny Ray, that singer, and very interesting. And she covered then the Ruby trial, and she never had really an interview with Ruby. She, with his attorney's permission, Melvin Belli, and I remember working with him. What a fantastic attorney he was. She chatted with Ruby, and she said, and she did say this, that she was going to break that case wide open. She had information. I don't know. So she's found dead in her beautiful 5-story townhouse, coming back from, I think almost every night they would go to the Copacabana or 21, one of those clubs, and sit around as high-level people and schmooze autopsy findings. Now, I've had a chance to discuss this with the person who did the autopsy, Dr. James Luke, who was a contemporary of mine. He was a deputy medical examiner at Manhattan, and Michael Bodden was there, another deputy medical examiner, and a third one, William Sterner. We were all quite friendly, and we came up at about the same time. So I talked with those guys back then, and these were their findings: no trauma, no signs of violence. She had a blood alcohol level of 0.15, so you can relate that in all states, but I think one. For driving at 0.08, so this is twice the level for driving, not a very high level by itself, and then a barbiturate level 2.4. This is taken directly from the autopsy report. Eligible is 2.4 milligrams per liter, and the barbiturate, interestingly, was a combination of Tuinol, another one. Tuinol is no longer on the market. Tuinol, interesting name. It was a combination of secobarbital and Nembutal. Secobarbital, Seconol is still around. Nembutal, a proprietary name, is still around. But Tuinol, and the name was a play on words. It's spelled Tuinal, Tuinol, Two, two in all, Tuinal, and the drug was removed from the market. So she had her drugs, and she was taking them. There's no question about that. The question was, and there's no question about the cause of death, in my opinion. Question is, did somebody give her the drugs, force them down her throat? And these are the alternative theories. Murdered by an associate of Carlos Marcello, a cost-share investigation, JFK, Mark Shaw, and I've had ongoing correspondence. Mark, by the way, last night or tonight is making a presentation in Dublin, Ireland, and we've been corresponding continuously. Mark has been trying to break these. He had written 2 wonderful books, The Reporter Who Knew Too Much and Denial of Justice. I highly recommend those to you if you have any interest at all in Dorothy Kilgallen, and you should, because it relates to JFK and touches upon Ruby, of course, in detail. It even touches upon other cases, but primarily directed toward Killgallen. And he's been trying to get her body exhumed unsuccessfully. I told him I would do the autopsy. I don't think he's going to be successful. And this guy, so you see this Pataki, he admits to having been present there, the last person to have seen her alive. And Mark feels that if he can show DNA, but you know, there's a problem too, because if you and I shook hands earlier today, a couple of the lovely ladies that I kissed on the cheek, my DNA is there. They can explain it to their husbands tonight when they ask, where have you been today, honey? And they do the buccal smears, but in the meantime, it's there. So I don't know what it's going to prove. So can I disprove that somebody got into that house and forced something? No. Is it possible? It would be difficult. You can only get so much down somebody's throat where there's no evidence of a struggle, no evidence of violence, no scratches on, well, bruises on her, defensive type wounds and so on. And she would have had to have taken about 15 to 20 of those capsules, by the way, to have achieved that level. About 15 to 20. And the alcohol of a 0.15, you get, with one shot of whiskey, you get a 0.025. So you would need 6 shots of whiskey, allowing then for some metabolism. You're going to need at least 7, unless it's done right away, or 6-7 bottles of beer, and then she wasn't going to drink 6-7 bottles of beer, or 6-7 full ounce glasses of wine. That's what you would need to get that kind of level. So how do you force that down somebody's mouth? There's no evidence of any kind of damage to the mouth, to the oral mucosa, to the esophagus of the trachea to indicate someone had tried to force something down. Again, so this is something I can't rule out, but I just want you to know the autopsy was done by a competent forensic pathologist in New York City medical examiner's office. And when you question this, fine, I'm not offended in a vicarious fashion, but I'm saying you're reaching out now, and you got to say that in the Ruby case, Dr. Earl Rose covered up, and in the Killgallen case, 3 forensic pathologists, and as well as the chief, Dr. Milton Halpern, foremost medical examiner in the country at that time, covered up. These are the things you can't just dismiss them. I can't. And not because I'm a matter of professional collegiality. I just, I can deal with things. I can question. I can challenge, as I have done, and I do every week in my medical legal reports, and several times a year in my testimony. I'm very proud 3 weeks ago to whip the U.S. Attorney of the Southern District of New York on a drug-related homicide, the most powerful U.S. Attorney's office in the country. And I went up against them, and I got my testimony resulted in an acquittal for this guy. So, I'm not hesitant to go up against the big boys, believe me, but I can only go so far. David Ferrie, fascinating case. And I received a wealth of material from Judith, all kinds of details. So here, but to refresh you, here he is, a former Eastern Airline pilot. Some of you don't even remember Eastern Airlines. And he's found dead in a place of death there. And the circumstances, somehow his name was leaked in the Garrison investigation of Clay Shaw, and I was involved, was consulted by Jim Garrison. That was my first testimony under oath for a federal judge in Washington, D.C. For Garrison in an attempt to gain access to the autopsy materials. That was when I testified. It was January 1969. And the judge so ruled immediately from the bench. And the government, I'll never forget their arrogance, their brashness, their rudeness, stood up and said to the judge, and I was still a relatively young guy, and I thought, oh my God, they stood up and said, and this came from a deputy attorney general or whatever, we will appeal until hell freezes over. That's what that SOB said to the judge. Charles Halleck, who was the son of the former GOP legislative leader in the United States Congress, Charles Halleck. And I didn't get access, and so with great restraint, I told Mr. Garrison, I can't testify not having seen the autopsy report. So anyway, then he's found dead. And official cause, cerebral aneurysm. What were the autopsy findings? At the New Orleans coroner's office, Nick Chetta was the coroner, a physician. The autopsy was done by a forensic pathologist, and this is what was found, a berry aneurysm. Berry aneurysms are given that name because they look like small berries. You have a series of vessels on the undersurface of the brain called the circle of Willis. The vertebral arteries come up, they feed into the basilar arteries, and then they branch into the anterior communicating arteries, right and left, and then they move up, and then posterior, and then anterior communicating arteries. So you can get this kind of aneurysm anywhere. It's the genetic defect. Ben's brother, one of my sons, is a neurosurgeon, and he spent 8 years in training, 2 of which were in vascular problems, and he deals with Berry aneurysms all the time. There's no way. I mean, people are lucky who develop a severe headache or whatever, or a series of headaches, and they nowadays with CAT scans and MRIs, and they identify it, and then Danny will go in and repair it. They can even do sometimes partial repair with stents not even going in. It's miraculous. I don't know how the hell they do it. But that was the cause. He had a Berry aneurysm. You cannot produce a Berry aneurysm artifactually. He did have hypertensive cardiovascular disease and pulmonary edema, that's congestion in the lungs. Now, he was known to be taking thyroid medication. And question has arisen, was he made to take a lot of thyroid capsules? That is a possibility. Synthroid, which is the proprietary name, this is the thyroid medication used for people who suffer from hypothyroidism. And Judith, by the way, you one small question has been raised about the size of the thyroid. 35 grams is not large. It's a higher level of thyroid, but thyroid in a man you're going to be anywhere from 28 to 32, 34, but 30, 34, 35. So it's not. But he did have hypothyroidism. They did not test for thyroid levels, to my knowledge. We usually don't, toxicological labs usually do not test for biological medications of a prescribed nature, but the autopsy was done there by a pathologist on the staff of the New Orleans coroner's office. I had met Chetta, but I did not know him personally like I knew other people, and the subsequent coroner, Frank Minyard, for whom I did 30 autopsies on a pro bono basis following Hurricane Katrina. It's a good office, and this is what you have, no marks of violence. So excessive thyroid medication can indeed lead to cardiac tachycardia, fast beating, which then can lead to cardiac arrhythmia, which can lead to cardiorespiratory arrest, and certainly someone who is hypertensive, high blood pressure, no question. So here again is a case in which I cannot rule out, and I cannot tell you I can rule out that somebody came in. But there's no way that anybody would have known that he had a Berry aneurysm. And he did have then the hemorrhage that went with it, subdural, beneath the dura mater, subarachnoid, overlying the brain. No way, they weren't doing MRIs and CAT scans in those days, so nobody could have known that David Ferrie had a Berry aneurysm. But maybe they were lucky. Maybe they thought they would produce a cerebral hemorrhage, and they could have caused a cerebral hemorrhage by excessive thyroid medication, causing the heart to beat that way. But here again, I have no basis for it. So that's the problem. These are the alternative theories. Suicide due to despondency, murder to quash further involvement in Garrison investigation. Why is the absence of hemorrhage noted so many times? Well, that varies. It is mentioned many times, that's true. And it is true that it's mentioned more often than most, but all negative. They may have been mentioning it because of a question at that time. I never had a chance to speak with them. Then maybe somebody raised the question, did he take too much thyroid medication? Did he cause his heart, was he hypertensive? So I think that probably is why they kept talking about, so no hemorrhage here, no hemorrhage there. Thank you. And thyroid size and the stomach contents tested. Could have done that, should have done it, but usually they don't do it. They usually test blood, bowel, and then other things like naked in bed without his wig and eyebrows and packed and boxed. These are things I can't get into. So that's it. And Judith, I'll leave it up to you. I think your time, or maybe there is no time, as you wish, Judith. David, for any questions, I'm in no hurry, but it's up to you, Judith's program.
Yeah, there's 10 minutes for a question and answer, Dr. Simpson.
Okay. David, you want to come up here, or Judith, to handle the question? I mean, but please, and go ahead.
Cyril, over here. Cyril, Ed Tatro. Just three quick things. One issue that Cyril has not brought up is that he is a grassroots hero as well. 40 years ago, when we were both young and pretty, I recruited him to speak at Boston University with me. And we spoke together 40 years ago in front of a large group at Boston University. And he and I, through the years, have done that at all kinds of colleges all over the place, little groups like this, trying to spread the word about the truth. So he deserves credit for that, because he's famous for the famous things, but he was also doing the little things, number one. Number two, I'll take exception to with our inspector. When I was speaking, inspector was thinking of running for the presidency for the Republicans, and I used to tell the crowds, if our inspector gets the nomination for the Republican Party for the presidency, and the Democrats nominate a diseased bear, vote for the bear. And I used to say, and now I'm 72, and there are still people who come up to me in Massachusetts who are 50 and 60 who heard me speak 30 years ago, and they come up to me, and they've forgotten all the details of the Kennedy case, but they come up and go, vote for the bear. And finally, one other quick issue. When Oswald was murdered, there was a fourth-year medical student there named Frederick Bieberdorf. And there's a document, Frederick Bieberdorf, okay? He graduated in June of '64, and he's dead now, but he was a doctor for years. But he admitted to the FBI, or whoever the doctor, I think it's the FBI, that he was massaging Oswald's sternum after he was shot, and he actually got in the ambulance with him and continued to massage the sternum. And some doctors, including I correspond with Dr. Mantic, have suggested the possibility that, depending upon the wounds, you could be putting blood into his lungs and killing him.
A good point. That was a stupid thing to do for him, to massage somebody who's been shot. You don't massage somebody. That was bad medicine.
Okay, I'm glad I brought it up. And finally, one last thing. I'll be talking tomorrow morning about New Orleans with Victoria Salza, who went to school with Lee Harvey Oswald. And she knew Dr. Frank Minyard. And you brought him up, so that was another thing I should make mention of. He wanted to exhume Clay Shaw's body because he saw irregularities in how he was embalmed and buried. And there are a number of political issues, but one issue was he started getting death threats, and so he backed off. So I thought I would throw that out too.
Thank you.
It's great to see you, Cyril.
Ed, thank you for your comments. And Ed, I won't question the veracity and validity of your comments, but you said 40 years ago, there's no way my mother would have permitted me to travel as a teenager to Boston. Please don't hesitate, anybody. And please express a different opinion. You're not going to offend me.
Before you said that you were pleased with the...
We need somebody that can, with a mic or something.
Over here.
Oh, okay.
I'm very small and inconspicuous.
I see you.
First of all, thank you again. Congratulations on the award.
Thank you.
I shudder to think where we would be in this field of study without your perseverance and work as a pathologist. Thank you. Been following you for 40 years. One question, kind of a reverse engineering question. Back during the church committee days, it came out that the CIA had all these ways to kill people and induce heart attacks, and so you're very familiar with those. You know what I'm talking about. So rather than me getting in and describing them, I'm more curious about all these deaths that happened associated with the assassination. It's quite obvious that many of them were heart attacks. Have you done much work in reverse engineering, thinking, hey, this could have been done by this type of weapon?
Yeah, well, people here might know, but I recall the London Times, I think it was the London Times, that did a forensic epidemiological study, I'll characterize it, on how many people who had some involvement, relationship with the JFK died within a period of time, and I think it came out to be in the tens, hundreds of millions, absolutely. And listen, when it comes to the CIA, and I'll say this publicly without hesitation, the CIA, and I'm telling you guys anything you don't know, the CIA in those years, it was its own government. It was its own government. These were super patriots. They were concerned about America going to hell in a basket. When the flag was flying and the Star-Spangled Banner was being sung, they saw and heard something more than plain, everyday, patriotic slobs like us. We're not capable of understanding that. They knew. Allende in Chile, Arbenz in Guatemala, the brothers in Vietnam, Mossadegh in Iran, they knew. They knew whom they had to eliminate, and goddamn it, they did it. And never forget this, JFK, it's so simple, it's so obvious. They're looking at 5 years of John Kennedy, 8 years of Bobby Kennedy, 13 years is a lifetime in the socio-political development of a country, a lifetime. I'm not going to digress into the current situation, but just look, whether you're a Trump person or you're an anti-Trump, but look in less than 3 years, the changes, you know, what is accomplished then when you're president of the United States of America, good or bad. 13 years. You sit back and you say, boy, wait till the ninth inning when we're up at bat. Wait until the third period of the hockey game, the second half of the basketball game. 13 years, forget about it. And what was going on? Cold War with Russia, Cuban, the Bay of Pigs debacle, civil rights, voting rights. There was that scene, I think it was documented, of Mike Mansfield, the Democratic senator leader from Montana, sitting there with John F. Kennedy in his office following the Bay of Pigs. Kennedy took a piece of paper, tore it up like we do, you know, you tear it up and then you fold it and you tear it up some more, threw it into the air and said, "This is what I intend to do to the CIA." It was its own government. You know, we are Americans, and we talk, and you know, horribly KGB, MKVD, it used to be KGB, and then the spy groups around the world, including even an ally, Mossad in Israel. Everybody has spy groups, but not America. We don't do that kind of shit, baby. In no way. We are Americans. We don't do any of those things. What are you talking about? Poisoning people? Feigning a heart attack? Causing somebody to die conveniently? Drowning or being struck by a car? We don't do those things. We don't, no way. And when we tell you something, you can be sure that it is honest, it is truthful. We don't lie to our people. Sure.
You don't believe it, ask me.
That's right. Then we come back, you know, we all come back to that bridge in outside New York City is still available for sale. Still available. Anybody wants to buy it. Okay, folks, thank you very much.